Welcome, everyone. I'd like to call the June 2nd, 2021 Planning Commission meeting to order. The main purpose of tonight's meeting is a hearing on the general downtown corridor 3-floor overlay and related code amendments. Before we move on to the agenda items, I'd like to acknowledge our remote meeting format. As with our previous meetings, the commissioners and staff will be participating via Zoom. During this Zoom meeting, the chat and question functions are not available for use to the public to ensure compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act. We have a public comment agenda item at the beginning of the meeting. This is the time for comments on issues not on the agenda. We will also welcome public testimony during the public hearing on the downtown code amendments after staff presentation and before the commissioners begin discussion of that item. Please use the raise hand function if you would like to make a comment, and Director Cotterman will bring you into the meeting and invite you to unmute. Please limit these comments to 3 minutes. Under Governor Inslee's Proclamation 20-28 regarding open public meetings, this meeting will be held remotely. Public comment will be allowed both in writing and orally. The Imagine Bothell notice, city website, and tonight's agenda all provided information to the public for providing comments. People wishing to comment were instructed to notify staff or provide written comments by 3 p.m. today. The video of this meeting will be streamed live, as well as recorded and available for later viewing on the city's YouTube channel. A call-in number was provided on the meeting agenda for members of the public who wish to call in by phone and listen live to the meeting. For our phone-in callers, during staff presentations, staff will make every effort to specify which materials they are referencing so everyone can follow along. Those who have provided advance notice are able to make comments under the audience comment portion of the meeting. Email was encouraged as well and will be acknowledged. At this point, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the attendance of the commissioners. Commissioner Dodd.
Present.
Commissioner Westerbeck. I see him there. Commissioner Curd.
Present.
Commissioner Robeson.
Present.
Commissioner Aldrichs.
Here.
And Commissioner Gustafson.
Present.
So all the commissioners are present. In addition, we have Community Development Director Mike Cotterman and Mike Stanger, Senior Planner with Arch. I'd also like to take a moment to recognize that Senior Planning Dave Boyd is not here. He's had a family tragedy, and our thoughts are with him. I believe I can speak on behalf of the entire commission for that. So we wish our thoughts are with Mike in this. So lastly, before we begin, I'd like to reiterate some meeting guidelines. For all meeting attendees, speak clearly and pause frequently. State your name each time before speaking. Mute your microphone when not speaking, and try to remember to unmute before you speak. If you are also streaming the live video, please turn the sound off as there is a delay and it can be confusing. For commissioners, at specific breaks in the presentation, I will be calling on members who wish to speak or ask a question. If you wish to speak, please indicate this by holding up your speaker cards. I'll do the best to see all of those who are seeking to speak. Sometimes when there's a presentation and a banner, I have to scan back and forth and it takes a moment. Identify yourself before you ask a question, make a motion, second a motion, or participate in debate. And please mute your microphone when you are not speaking. So moving on to our agenda tonight, the first item on the agenda is public comment. In keeping with Governor Jay Inslee's Emergency Proclamation 20-28 regarding public gatherings and open public meetings, the city has accepted visitor comment in writing, as well as accepted sign-up sheets for those who wish to speak at tonight's meeting. All written comments submitted to staff no later than 3 p.m. were forwarded to all commissioners and are part of the record. This time is for items which are not on tonight's agenda. Again, if you wish to speak on the downtown code amendments, we'll recognize you later on. Director Cotterman, please let us know if there are any comments received.
Mr. Chair, the only comments I'd received are related to the public hearing item this evening. So in looking at the list of attendees, I believe they're all here for the public hearing. Mr. Thomas had his hand up briefly. I'm assuming he's here to speak on the public hearing item. If anyone does wish to speak on an item not related to the public hearing this evening, please raise your hand. I'm not seeing any, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, Director Cotterman. We look forward to hearing from the individuals who wish to speak on tonight's agenda item. So the next item is approval of the minutes. We have before us the minutes of the May 5th meeting. Is there a motion to approve those minutes? Commissioner Curd.
I move to approve the May 5th meeting minutes.
All right.
I second.
Is there, okay, Commissioner Westbeck seconds. Is there any discussion around those minutes? Scanning our panels here, I see none. So with that, all in favor of approving tonight's minutes? We can go visually. I see our commissioners, Commissioner Aldrich, all the commissioners have indicated approval of the minutes. So the May 5th meeting minutes are approved. Director Cotterman, any new business for us tonight?
No new business, Mr. Chair.
All right. So with that, we will move to the public hearing on the general downtown corridor, 3-floor overlay and related code amendments. We'll start with a staff presentation. If the applicant wishes to make a statement, we will recognize him. We'll then have a public hearing. And again, use the raise hand function to be recognized. Following that, we'll have commission discussion. If commissioners have questions specific to the staff presentation, please, clarifying questions, please let us know and we'll recognize you. Otherwise, we'll reserve further discussion for later on. So with that, Director Cotterman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a brief presentation. Hopefully we'll cover the key items for this evening. And of course, I'm not seeing it. There it is. I'm hoping that's visible to everyone. Okay, thank you.
Yes, we've got it.
So tonight is a public hearing. At the end of the public hearing, after commission deliberation and discussion, we are seeking a recommendation from the commission unless you would like to have some additional time and consideration, in which case there's a second option that I'll speak about this evening as well. So I'm just going to hit the highlights of what the proposal includes. As I mentioned, this public hearing and possible recommendation, there are two options this evening. If you wish to proceed on the basis of what has already been presented and discussed in the direction that we've received from the commission previously, then we'd be seeking a recommendation on the affordability requirements, the reduced parking for micro apartments, the application of this to properties just along Beardsley and 185th that are not adjacent to or across from single family, or as you are aware, there's been a request from the owners, several owners in Larive condominiums along Valley View that would like to be included in the proposal. That was a direction, I should say, that the commission made at the last meeting, was to exclude that area. So if you would like to consider inclusion of that area, then we would ask for a continuation of the public hearing to your next meeting on June 16th. So we have some time to do some additional analysis and refine that proposal. So just very quickly to go over the proposal as it currently stands. So the first option, proceeding on the direction we've had so far. Again, this would be defined based on the frontages along Beardsley and 185th. It avoids having to revise the zoning map. It would apply to those parcels that would meet those criteria, as well as any assembly or subdivision of parcels that may happen subsequently that would then meet those criteria. So we wouldn't have to go through and rezone individual parcels in order to allow the project to proceed under the new regulations. Directs the opportunity, the direction is the opportunity for additional height to parcels where it can be achieved, and it eliminates area E from consideration. Part of C could still qualify, depending again if they subdivided the parcels there. And from this point forward, we're really getting away from the A, B, C, D, and E, because the focus has been on just those areas where this would apply under option 1. Option 2, if you wanted to go that direction, basically it's going back to where we started with the proposal, and that it would apply to all those GDC zones. It would rely on the special setback requirements when it's adjacent to single family per the existing code. The affordability requirements, the reduced parking for micro apartments, and the other amendments would still apply. And if you do choose this option, as I mentioned, staff would recommend a continuation of the public hearing to give us a little bit more time to do some additional analysis on that. So the special setback requirements that apply in either option have to do with adjacency to single family residential only zoning. Or I should say residential only zoning. And so there's the required minimum setback, and then there's an additional step back of 65 feet for the upper floor above the 3 floors, because this would allow it to go to those 4 floors. That would be the situation if it is immediately adjacent. If it's across the street, it would have a similar requirement of that additional step back of 65 feet for the 4th floor. And again, this would apply where it is adjacent or across the street from residential only zones. The way that would work on a sloped property would be, oops, sorry, this is a little different. This is a different, slightly different topic. My apologies. The way that this is addressing a variable setback for the rear yard setback, so that, and the front yard setback, so they could actually move the building closer to the front yard property line in exchange for moving further away from the single family that would be adjacent to it. And it also shows how the different height would fit on that particular site. So it's stepping down, but you still get the 4th floor because the residential, single family residential is on the opposite side of the building. That is also how it could work with the LaRive property, because they're also on a fairly steep slope there. So would the first building closest to the street, which would be across the street from single family, would have that minimum front yard setback of 20 feet and a maximum height of 3 stories or 35 feet. The parking in this case would be mostly subterranean and would not count toward that height. It's calculated based on the average. On the backside, without the GDC overlay removed, it would also be limited to those 3 stories, and that would be approximately what the configuration would look like. If it were to allow the 4 stories with the setback and the slope away, you could actually do 4 floors on the building that would be behind the parcel that would be across the street from the single family residential. So you would pick up some additional units that way. The same requirement for affordable housing may apply, or it might be something that could be reduced a little bit as well, recognizing there'd be fewer units as a result of that. So again, this evening, this is a public hearing. If the commission has any questions or clarifications, and I realize this was a fairly brief and concise presentation, and then we'd have the public testimony and then any more in-depth discussion and direction from the commission. And again, the 2 options for a recommendation this evening based on the proposal and the findings and conclusions and the draft code amendments that are in your packet, or to continue the public hearing with additional time for staff analysis and refinement to come back to you at your next meeting. So with that, I'd be happy to try to answer any questions that you might have.
Commissioner Gustafson.
Thank you, Chair Kiernan. I was not present at the last meeting, but I did watch it. And I wanted to ask a clarifying question about how the variable setback works. With the flexibility given with a variable setback, does the developer need to use that variable setback to always increase the space between the new development and the single family residential area? That's my understanding, that they cannot use that setback to creep up to the single family area and leaving a huge amount of space behind. Is that the correct understanding?
Yeah, I believe so, yes. I think not quite sure I followed that last part of it, but the way that it's intended is you have a front yard setback, you have a rear yard setback. The front yard setback, I don't recall exactly what it is, but let's say for illustrative purposes that it's 20 feet. So they could pull that up toward the street, the front property line, another 15 feet and get within 5 feet of the property line. They would have to use those 15 feet to move the building that much further from the single family on the rear yard setback.
Great, that's what I thought. So it's one direction, always going in the direction of leaving more space for the residential.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yes.
Other commissioners? Commissioner Alders.
Thank you, Chair. Jenny Alders here. This is a question. So, Mike, one of the things that I heard you say at the end that I would like some clarification on is about the number of units that would be reduced based on the recommendation or based on what you had described there. What is that? Do you have an idea of how many units the reduction would be if they weren't able to develop that fourth floor?
It's really impossible to say at this point because there's no specific proposal on the site. The main purpose of that graphic was just to illustrate the fact that it'd still be limited to 3 floors and 35 feet on the portion that's closest or across the street from the single family. So they'd only be able to add to the portion that's further away from that. They'd only get that extra floor on basically half of the building in that particular example. What that would translate to in terms of number of units, it really would depend on the specific project proposal.
Other questions? So I've got a question, and it may be due to the abbreviated presentation, but everything there referred to single-family zoning, and my recollection is there are certain provisions that apply to adjacent single-family uses. In particular, I forget whether it's A or B, but to the north there is a neighborhood which is not zoned single-family, but has been developed single-family, but the limitations will still apply.
Correct, and thank you for that. I didn't really touch on that. The change is specific to that setback variable. So the one that Commissioner Gustafson asked about, that allows them to pull the building, pull the building closer to the front yard. Currently, the way that it's worded, it only applies to single-family zoned properties, and this would make the change to single-family zoned or used property. So if it's not zoned single family, but if it has a single family unit, they could take advantage of pulling the building up closer to the front yard setback and then increasing it in the back. The other variable setback, the step back, the 65 feet, that applies next to residential only zones.
Okay. Other clarifying questions or comments from commissioners before we move into, do we know if we have an applicant statement?
I do not see the applicant in the attendee room.
Okay. Then our next step would be the public hearing. So seeing no further clarifying questions from commissioners, let's open the public hearing and invite individuals to make their statements. Okay.
The first person that we have to speak this evening is Ray Thomas, and I'm going to bring him in. And just a logistical question, Mr. Chair, are you timing?
I'm setting it up right now.
Okay, thank you. Just want to see if it was something I needed to track as well. Ray, can you unmute?
I think I'm doing that.
There you are. Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay.
Ray, you're up. You have 3 minutes.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for recognizing me. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. I'm sorry to hear about David's family situation. I'm speaking on behalf of the LaRev owners and board members as well. We had an annual meeting about a week and a half ago, there was some discussion of this area. The members who voted to develop the property to the west of our current buildings were in agreement that we should try to seek inclusion in this amendment code changes. And I guess I'd like to ask based on the presentation, I would like to ask the commissioners to please exercise option 2 here, which is, I think, the only one that really gives us some further consideration, and it gives staff some time to deal with our comments and concerns about development of the property there. I was under the impression from a previous feasibility study that we had that we could develop the property facing 522 or to the south away from Valley View with 4 stories, but that appears to not be the case unless we are accepted into this code change. So without going through another revision cycle again. So I would encourage you to consider us. I think the specifics are in my written statements, and you can each review those as you like. If you have any specific questions, I'd defer the rest of my time to answer any questions.
I'm not seeing any commissioners indicating any questions. We did receive your written comments, and we appreciate that. And we had the opportunity to review them. So thank you, Mr. Thomas.
Thank you.
Okay, the next speaker we have is Gregory Miller. And I will bring him in as an attendee as soon as my computer catches up with me here. And I should have also mentioned at the beginning, Mr. Chair, that I did forward to the commission earlier today an email that we received from Christina Gustafson regarding concerns and opposition to the inclusion of what we've referred to as Area E along Valley View and Circle Drive. Concerns about pedestrian safety, traffic, parking, construction, and opposed to micro apartments in that area, as well as the reduced parking for that. And my apologies, Mr. Chair. Somehow I clicked on the wrong person.
Yeah, you took me out of the meeting there for a minute.
Sorry about that.
Getting ready to text you. Help.
I can be trained on how to use this, but it doesn't mean I'll do it right.
We just about have it down by the time we go in person.
Yes. Okay, Mr. Miller, there you are. Unmuted. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, thanks. I'm own my condo in La Rive. Have been living in this condominium complex since 2016. I did submit a written comment as well, and just wanted to say that I'm in support of, I don't quite understand all the complex wording on how to say it, but I'm in support of including us in an amendment so that the property that's to the west of La Rive would be able to be developed.
Okay, we hear your comment. We appreciate that. Anything further you'd like to say during your allocated time?
Not at this time.
All right, Mr. Miller, thank you for your comment.
See if I can get the right person this time. Okay. I have no one else that had signed up to speak prior to the meeting, but there are some others in the attendee room. If any of you would like to speak, please raise your hand and I will bring you into the to the commission. Okay, I have one so far. Mr. Walsh, could you unmute, please?
Still muted. Oh, there you go.
Can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. I would like to reiterate my opposition to including Section E in this proposal. That would completely change the nature of this single-family neighborhood. The Rev does sit down in that location and occupies that space, and expansion of the Rev would not help the neighborhood at all with regard to the single-family quality of life that we have here. I'm also concerned about the parking situation, the micro apartments, and the traffic. In the last meeting, I believe there were 3 criteria that Mr. Boyd referred to that supported excluding Section E from the code amendment. One of them was access from 522, and there were 2 others that I cannot recall. Perhaps the director would recall those. Director Gatterman, did you recall the other 2?
I can respond after you've used your time, sir. I don't want to take up your time.
Thank you very much. So those are 3 compelling reasons to not include Section E in the code amendment. And I think one of the most serious ones of the 3 is the access from 522. So on Circle Drive, the neighbors, we are all not supporting inclusion of Section E. And you've heard from Ms. Chris Gustafson, and I think you've heard from others. And I just wanted to really make a strong point that we are not in support of including Section E. And I would appreciate you going with option 1 and not with option 2 as presented this evening. And that concludes my remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh.
Could you also state your full name for the record, please?
James Walsh.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Do we have other interested commenters?
Would anyone else in the attendee room like to speak for the public hearing this evening? I'm seeing a couple of other folks that haven't spoken yet. One more. Christina Gustafson.
Ms. Gustafson, you'll have to unmute. Okay.
I'm here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Gustafson. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Well, my first concern when it concerns the portion E adjacent to the existing LaRev condos is parking. Assuming each proposed unit would have more than 1 occupant, a spouse, a roommate, another adult of driving age, a visitor, the 3/4 of a parking space couldn't begin to accommodate that number of cars. So that's one thing. The residents of the microhousing would need to exit the property either on 522 or Valley View. Neither option seems viable. 522, I mean, the speed limit is supposed to be 35 miles an hour down there. Clearly, no one does that. And I live right here, and I've heard crashes right down there when people come flying off that ramp. from the other part of 405. It's quite dangerous. So that's a concern. And the 4-story height of the buildings, regardless of the slope, would obliterate the view that the existing family homes on Valley View have now. And the homeowners will end up looking directly into apartment windows. And the last thing I'd like to say is I'm really having a struggle trying to understand why anyone living in the Rev is okay with having, it almost sounded to me as if they thought they were going to extend their own condos onto that property. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think they want to put the micro housing there. Am I right in assuming that? And I'm trying to understand why that would be okay with them to give up green space and trees and birds and whatever else to have a bunch of apartments right there. So I guess that about sums it up for me. Thank you for listening.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Gustafson.
Of course, anytime.
Other commenters?
I believe Mr. Thomas has his hand raised to speak again. That's at the discretion of the chair.
There were some specific questions directed to them. So yes, I think it would be beneficial to let him speak again.
Okay, Ray, you're back. You could unmute.
Thank you, Director Katterman and Chair Kernan. Yes, I did want to speak to a couple of the comments. One, there is no specific planned development. We do not have a proposal, nor do we have a developer at this time. So speculation on it being micro housing is just that, speculation. We have just started the process of looking for a potential developer, and we're really trying to expand what might be actually a good fit with the neighborhood. Currently, I don't think REV really has any negative impact on the neighborhood. In fact, it's probably a very positive impact, as we do not have any street parking at all. So parking would not be an issue. And in fact, the sale of our property would probably eliminate the current parking, which is actually away from our property. So I don't think it's going to add any really additional traffic. The number of units that could probably be added, we have 40 units right now, with some 4th floors, 4 parking garages on the lower levels. So I think that the public safety is not really a factor, and there would be no access off of 522. That would require state permitting, is my understanding. And the most that would happen there is possibly the parceling of some of those frontage parcels to add some space. And that, again, is purely speculative on my part as well. La Rev does provide significant affordable housing when you look at the rents and homeowner costs in the area for 2- and 3-bedroom housing. And I think we are very concerned with being able to sell in order to continue to be affordable housing in the area. We have some significant costs that we appear to be facing, and that can only potentially increase homeowner association dues unless we're able to sell this property. So I would encourage, while I have also stated in my written comments for the neighbors that we would support excluding the properties, the parcels along Circle Drive, and
your 3 minutes are up, so please wrap up.
We just wouldn't encourage the inclusion of the condos across the street from us, as they are a limited development potential.
Thank you. All right, any additional comments? Oops. You're muted. Director Cotterman, you're muted.
And you even warned me at the beginning, Mr. Chair. I knew that was specifically for me, too. So, Ms. Rosenthal, did you wish to speak this evening? If so, please raise your hand. Does not appear that anyone else wishes to testify this evening, Mr. Chair.
All right, so is our next step then to close the public hearing, or we have our discussion?
I would, at this point, I would recommend that you keep the public hearing open. If you decide to continue it, then we don't have to re-advertise a new public hearing.
Well, let's then move into commissioner discussion. Do I see any Commissioner Dodd and then Commissioner Gustafson?
Thanks, Chair. Amanda Dodd here. I really appreciated the owners of LaRive reaching out to let us know that their property had kind of gotten caught in the debate without them really having had a chance to call in before now. We'd heard a lot of other area homeowners before we were able to hear from like Ray Thomas and Gregory Miller today and other owners. I think it's worth continuing the public hearing so that we can give staff a chance to look at options that hopefully can work for both sets of opinions we're hearing from residents. That's kind of where I'm at, but I'm curious where everyone else is.
Thank you. Commissioner Gustafson.
Sarah Gustafson here. I agree with Commissioner Dodd. I was able to walk the neighborhood. I was not able to walk 8 miles since I'm 8 months pregnant. And I was very curious when walking the street in between the residential houses and, well, the La Rev condominiums, what were the opinions of the folks living in La Rev who are living in Lot E, to my understanding, as to this. And I am very glad to hear them. I think this speaks to the fact that future flexibility, as Commissioner Curd says, is something that we always need to think about. And I would keep that in mind as we consider whether to continue the public hearing, which I support. Thank you.
Commissioner Westerbeck.
Thank you. I want to concur with what both Commissioner Dodd and Commissioner Gustafson said. It really does warrant extending the public hearing so we can see what staff might come up with, because I do want to respect La Rev's comments. There's Greg and Ray's comments tonight. They represent, it sounds like, a lot of owners there. So it's just incumbent on us to at least consider all those people in that existing development, because that's at least as many people as we heard from in previous comments. And someone mentioned Commissioner Curd's comments about the future. The land La Rev, I've walked that recently where La Rev is, and it's valuable land. It's going to be very useful if we can put housing on it, especially if it's more affordable housing. It also drops down a lot right there. I mean, right out the street, there's a retaining wall. So I don't think a 4-floor building there would be a very big deal, particularly with the 65-foot setback that's in the zoning. So I don't think it's a real big threat there to most folks. I don't think it would be as impactful as they might think. And we just desperately need to make the best use of our limited area, and that's near transit, schools, and services. So again, option 2 is what I'd lean towards, and that would be a continuation right now of the hearing. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Westerbeck. Other commissioner comments? Commissioner Alders.
I would echo, thank you, Chair. Jenny Alders here. I would echo what the other commissioners have said, and I'd like to see us continue this public hearing and get more information regarding the La Rev condos. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Alders. Commissioner Curd.
Thanks. This is Karsten. I want to echo the previous commissioners, also reiterate my previous comments with two kind of updates. One is that I'm not quite sure with the 65-foot step backs from single family zoning or uses. I mean, most of the area here, we're talking about very small portions of the property being usable as 4 stories in any of these lots. So I just want to put it in context again that these code amendments aren't really going to make substantial changes to the character of a neighborhood or really affect a whole lot of this huge deficit of affordable housing in Bothell, especially just scrolling through on my apps looking for housing in Bothell. The median home is $800,000. Most of the homes in Valley View are more than that. So I really feel for the affordable housing options that are provided by condominiums like La Rev. And it doesn't necessarily have to be micro housing. It's a variety of uses that could be employed at those sites if we allow for flexibility. So I just want to reiterate my previous comments about flexibility. I think it's critical that we maintain kind of a code that allows for flexibility and isn't restrictive. By adding all sorts of restrictions to certain lots and not others and an overlay, our code just becomes more complex and unusable. So I fully support looking into this a little bit further. The other thing to think about after these new insights into La Rev's idea of selling off some extra property would be that, yes, there is a steep slope here, and they may be able to leverage, or a new developer for that lot may be able to leverage improvements there to help with slope stability, help with drainage and runoff, and vegetation. And so I think I for one, really value the critical areas code that we've worked so hard on. And I think that it goes a long way to protecting natural spaces, while keeping in mind that these are really valuable lots because of the investment we're making in them being walkable and transit oriented. So again, just 2 reiterations on my previous points. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Curd. Other comments? So I hear a pretty strong consensus on option 2 moving forward. I think we'll vote on that in a moment. I have just a couple of questions. There was a suggestion from the folks at La Rev to reconfigure Area E to delete the portion north of Valley View Drive. Would that be considered?
That would be one of the things that we would look at. Yes. You know, how would we limit the applicability of whatever changes that might be?
Okay. And what sort of traffic analysis would be done? Any environmental review here? That is a bit of a challenging intersection there, feeding off that property.
There wouldn't be any specific traffic analysis as part of this code amendment, because that would have been covered more broadly under the action EIS for the downtown sub area. There possibly could be additional analysis required for a specific development project that would come in.
So if a development brought in traffic above a certain threshold, they may be required to look at intersection improvements, or?
Yes, if they're increasing it over the threshold that was established for the entire sub area.
Okay.
Because this is part of the downtown sub area, and all of that was covered under a planned action EIS.
Yes. Okay. All right. Thank you. Mm-hmm. So any other questions or comments? So Commissioner Gustafson and then Director Cotterman.
Hi, Sarah Gustafson here. I am curious what a current condo in La Rev might cost. I think affordable home ownership, as Commissioner Aldrich has said, is really important. And I'm wondering what kind of numbers are we putting on it?
We could find that out. We could look into that. Find out what recent sales, or, you know, maybe ask the association. They can probably provide that information as well.
And the other point that they raised was they have a large capital improvement necessary that they're looking to offset, which would otherwise increase the cost of ownership there. So, Director Cotterman, did you want to have a comment, or were you going to direct us on procedure?
Actually, I was going to offer to respond to some of the questions that came up during the public testimony, if that's okay, Mr. Chair.
Oh, please do.
So I think Mr. Thomas addressed one of the questions that I heard about what would develop on the LaRev property. And there was an assumption that it would be micro housing. And he stated, I just want to emphasize to make sure that it's clear. I think it's probably clear to the commission, but just for the public to understand, what we're changing does not affect the type of development that can occur. What's currently allowed would still be allowed in the future. So micro housing could be built in any of that area now, and it would be subject to all the requirements of the current code. What the code amendment does is it allows for that additional height in some or all of that area, depending on where we ultimately land on all of this. And in exchange for that additional height and capacity, it allows the city to put a requirement for affordability at different levels. And that's what Mike Stanger has been working on, is coming up with those numbers. What percentage of units would have to be affordable, and at what level of affordability. So, and that's all included in the ordinance before you. And I just want to make sure we don't lose sight of that, because I think that's an important consideration of this. How many units we would get of affordable housing really depends on the type of development that we would see there. So the micro housing could occur on any of those. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's what would occur. They could be condominiums, they could be rental apartments, but they would all still have a requirement to provide a certain percentage of affordable units if they get the additional height. The other thing that I wanted to mention is to put a little bit of historic context on this, because this was a discussion I had with Dave Boyd, because I had some questions about, why this zoning was applied in these areas back when the plan was done over 10 years ago. And the reason was that it basically reflected the type of development that existed at the time. So the condominiums were there. There were other apartment buildings included in some of this area. And so it was a translation from the previous zoning into this new zone that best fit with the zoning and the uses that were there at the time. So I just thought that historic context might be helpful as the commission thinks about what this area should be going forward, if there are any changes to it. The other question I think came from Mr. Walsh, having to do with what other areas were excluded in addition to E. And if I recall correctly, and I can try to pull up a map if it would be helpful, but basically describe, it was the area C, which was sort of the triangle where 185th comes into Beardsley. And then D, part of which backs up to the Valley View neighborhood and is a budding single family. And part of it is directly on Beardsley and would be separated by a parcel from the single family area. So it only applied to a portion of D under the proposal to limit it to that, 185th and Beardsley. Again, depending on how parcels might be reconfigured in the future. So I think those were the main things I wanted to cover. I don't know if you have any questions about the affordability aspect, because we'll certainly keep that in the review as we look at this to see if anything needs to change as a result of it, but I can't imagine at this point that it would. Mike Stanger and I were talking earlier today. We may make some changes to the language in the draft code itself because of references to the multifamily tax exemption, or MFTE. Those may be more appropriately located in other sections of the municipal code, because most of that MFTE program will reside in Title III, which is finance and revenues, rather than Title 12, which is the zoning. So just to give you a heads up that you may see some changes in that as we refine that language a little bit. And I'll ask Mike if he had anything he wanted to add or highlight regarding the affordability levels, and any other refinements that you think might be necessary there. And certainly, if there are any other questions that the commission has about any of the other content of the code, then we'd be happy to try to answer this evening. So Micah, if there's anything you wanted to add about the affordability?
No, sir, I can't think of anything, but happy to answer questions.
So Commissioner Gustafson.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of Sarah Gustafson here. I'm trying to think of a scenario in which, say, 8 two-bedroom units were added to La Rev. What would be the affordability requirement, if any, that the city would put on them? I mean, we're talking about owner-occupied units, not rental-occupied units, so I'm curious if certain provisions would apply even.
Yeah, if it's more than 5 units, I think it's 5 or less would not be required. Is that right, Mike? Or is it
Right.
less than 5?
Whatever the old, it was based on the old short plat limit. So
Okay, so it'd be less than 5. Yeah, so there would be a requirement even if it's owner or for sale units, basically. And Mike, do you recall what the requirement is for that?
for the requirement that's in the proposed amendments,
Yes.
that it would be 10%. I believe it's 10% of the units affordable at 70% of median.
For sale.
Correct.
Okay, so for 8 units in the example that Commissioner Gustafson that you're using, that would be 0.8, so we'd round that up to 1.
And sorry.
Yes, Commissioner Gustafson.
And when we look at rentals, we look at area median income. For that 1 unit, would it still look at a percentage of area median income? And then how on earth would you find the lucky person who gets to get an affordable unit, one affordable unit?
The area median income would still apply, and that would be the 70% of area median income that Mike mentioned. As far as who would get it, that would be entirely up to who was ever selling the unit. That would be up to the developer, assuming they're the one selling the units, and they would have to make that available to someone, and they would have to provide documentation that they would income qualify for that unit, and that would be monitored by Arch.
That's right.
Did I miss anything there, Mike?
No, that's all true. We Arch on the initial sales, we set the price at that 70 AMI level, and currently, just for your information, I'm looking at a table now that would suggest, depending on homeowners' dues, that might be in the neighborhood of $280,000, $300,000 for a 3-bedroom unit. And we would take applications as we do for other homes in our program, and income qualify people and then refer them to the builder to close the sale.
And that would apply in perpetuity, for the life of the building, basically. So if the unit were ever sold, there's a formula that's used to determine how much it could be sold for. So there would be some capital gain for whoever was selling it, but it wouldn't go to market value at that point. There would still be a limitation on it, I believe. Is that correct?
Correct. Right.
Thank you, Mike, for putting on a number. I think having 1 unit available at $280K could be life-changing, even just for one family. Mm-hmm. And the other 7 units might be at 500, which is still very expensive, but less than 800. So right. Thank you for providing that. Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Chair, I would also note that Mr. Thomas has his hand raised again, but at your discretion. We're really past the public testimony part, and since the public hearing will be continued, there will be an opportunity to speak at the next meeting as well.
And I'm inclined to hold. I appreciate Mr. Thomas's interest in speaking now, but since we are going to reopen the hearing, it'll give him the opportunity, or continue the hearing rather. It will give him the opportunity to take a little time and respond to us at the next meeting. So Mr. Thomas, if you can hear us, thanks for your interest, but please tune back in 2 weeks and give us your feedback then. And I thought I saw another commissioner raise a hand as I was focused now. Commissioner Alderks.
Thank you, Chair. That was me. I offer this more as a reflection. I really do appreciate Mike Stanger, since we have both Cotterman and Stanger here. I really do appreciate the applied example that you were able to provide to us. And I'd like to reflect on a book that I recently read called The Sum of Us by Heather McGee. And the main thesis of that book is that when we stand in solidarity with people who have been historically marginalized and underprivileged, that everybody benefits. And I think that the description of the policy you've designed here actually accomplishes that goal, where one family would benefit from an affordable opportunity for home ownership, but there could be five other units that would become available for ownership as well. And it's not common to see elegant solutions like that. And so since you have so great, so nicely described it, I just wanted to offer that reflection as something really powerful that is being done here in our community, even if it, one at a time. And if we can see more opportunities like that, we would really be able to stand in solidarity with people who just frequently would not have the opportunity to purchase a home ever in our community. So thank you very much.
And I just checked the draft language. It is 5 or more. So any project with 5 or more units or 2,100 square feet or more of non-residential space would be subject to the mandatory affordability.
And recognizing there is no proposal on the table for that plot, I believe Mr. Thomas did say there were 40 units in LaRev now. I believe, and he thought the parcel was a similar size. So I think we're talking about considerably more than 5 units. I wouldn't put a number on it, but it's a few that they're talking about. So other comments now? Do we need a motion to continue the public hearing?
Yes. So it'd be a motion to continue the public hearing to June 16th Planning Commission meeting. I want to make sure I got the right date. Yes.
So barring any further discussion, is there a motion to continue to January 16th? Commissioner Dodd?
That would be June 16th.
June 16th, I'm sorry.
Thanks. I move to continue the public hearing to June 16th.
Is there a second to that motion? Commissioner Alderks, you were quicker.
All right, unmuting. I second that motion.
So it has been moved and seconded that we continue the public hearing to our next Planning Commission meeting. That would be June 16th. Any discussion around that motion? Seeing no indications from the commissioners, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
I see unanimous consent, everyone raising their hand, all the commissioners. So it has been moved and seconded that we continue the hearing. All commissioners voted in favor. And with that, we will move off of this item.
If I can just ask for one more question, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry.
Yes, please.
Just to clarify, as far as direction to staff, what I think I understood from this is really the additional analysis that you're looking for is really just about whether to include some or all of the properties that are in that area E, or that were excluded previously. Is that correct? We're not looking at any changes as far as the parking, the affordability requirements or anything like that.
I did not hear any discussion around that. I'll look to the other commissioners to see whether there was any other direction to staff as they prepare for the next meeting. Commissioner Gustafson?
Hi, Sarah Gustafson here. I wonder if it might be useful to have a larger scale map of Block E with some of the street names and landmarks written on it. So if we're talking about moving some things out of that area, we could really visualize what would happen. Thank you.
But again, it was just limited to that area. None of the other provisions of the amendments were questioned.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. I just want to make sure that we were doing everything that you needed for the next meeting to get to a recommendation. I appreciate that.
Okay. All right, so that concludes this item, and I want to thank Mike Stanger for filling in ably on this item and really for providing us very useful information.
Thank you. Pleasure.
All right. So moving along on the agenda, do we have any unfinished business before us?
I do not have any unfinished business, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. Next item, reports from staff.
Just a couple of items I wanted to let the commission know. So I heard from 4 of you that you're interested in attending or planning on attending the June 11th event. It's sponsored by the Housing Development Consortium and another couple of groups, a summit, I believe they're calling it. And I'm also planning on attending that. So because we have a potential quorum, we have issued a potential quorum notice for that meeting, just so you know. So if anyone else decides to go, you're fine. You don't need to let me know. We've already taken care of our legal requirements there. And then also just to let you know, the TDR program for Canyon Park that I know we've mentioned a couple of times. Just want to give you an update on that. We did finally come up with a funding agreement with Sound Transit that was approved by the City Council as well as by the Sound Transit Board. So we have a funding agreement in place. They have agreed to fund up to $115,500 for a feasibility study and an implementation program to put TDR in place for essential public facilities, specifically the bus base in Canyon Park, although we think it'll be transferable to other essential public facilities at least, and maybe other types of uses in the future. So the next step is for us to get the contract with the consultant approved, and that is currently scheduled to go to the City Council on June 15th. And then we'll do a kickoff meeting with Sound Transit and the consultants, and hopefully bring something back to the commission for you to start to chew on, possibly in July, more likely in September. But we'll want to move on that fairly quickly. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is we have currently planned on bringing 2 items to you at your next meeting. Just briefings, basically one on the countywide center candidate process that we're working on for the downtown area to get that designated as a countywide center under the King County's process. That's due in August. So we wanted to just give you an update of where we are on that. And then also on the growth targets and the countywide planning policies that we've been tracking and also participating in to some extent in both King and Snohomish counties. So we'll reassess that, given that we're going to have the public hearing continuation to the next meeting. We may drop one of those off, or we may decide to just fill up the whole meeting. We'll see. So if you have any preferences, let me know about those. But otherwise, we'll figure out how much we think we can get through in a reasonable amount of time on the 16th. And I believe, Commissioner Chair Kiernan, you had asked, prior to the meeting, you had asked me about when we were coming back into City Hall and having meetings in person again. So I can tell you a little bit about what we're currently thinking about. We don't have any firm direction yet, but we are still contemplating some type of a phased re-entry, if you will, into City Hall and other city buildings as far as the public and as far as staff. So that could start occurring as early as August, possibly, maybe some public interaction via appointment only, so that we still have some limitations on numbers of people that are in City Hall that we're interacting with face to face, and then a gradual reopening, full reopening into September. And at this point, we don't know exactly when we'll go back to live in-person meetings with the council or any of the boards or commissions. We're still waiting for some direction from the governor's office on that, and I believe there's a briefing. The governor has a press conference tomorrow or Friday, and we may know more at that time. At this point, barring any major direction in that, I would suggest that it's more likely we'll be back in person with the commission in September. Since you only have 3 meetings left before the August break, those would most likely be still be via Zoom. And then starting in September, one of the things assuming we come back in person in September, that's still a question mark. We're also looking at some type of a hybrid situation where the boards and commissions and the council would all be in person in council chambers. People could come to the meeting in council chambers, and then others could also participate via virtual if that's how they prefer to participate. So still a lot of logistics and technology to work out from that standpoint, but that is one option that we're also looking at.
And I expect you might limit the number of attendees at meetings pending the way things are going.
Yes, at least for a period of time, that is possible as well, yes.
So we are operating under Governor Inslee's Proclamation 2028, which for a while we were talking about being extended, and then it was just in place. So does he need to lift that proclamation or issue a second proclamation removing that, or is that something we'll hear about shortly?
I think we'll hear more about that because I know in one of the announcements a couple of weeks ago, he talked about June 30th, but yes, it was also contingent upon reaching a 70%
vaccination status,
vaccination level. So I think from a procedural standpoint, he could either simply rescind the order and then everything would just go back to whatever was before that, or he could supplant it with a new order that might have some different guidance in it. So
stay tuned.
Yes, typically we find out about these about the same time as everybody else when the press conference occurs. So we'll scramble then to try to comply with everything.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So that concludes reports from staff?
Yes, thank you.
So members, do we have any reports from members? I'm not seeing any. I do understand 4 of us will be attending next Friday. I don't know that we'll discuss it, but it's good to see people are interested in a very timely conference, given the items that are before us. We'll look forward to that. So seeing no other reports from members and there being no further business, is there a motion to adjourn? Commissioner Dodd.
I move to adjourn the meeting. Thanks.
Is there a second?
I second.
Commissioner Westerbeck seconds. So all in favor of adjourning? All right, we have unanimous consent. I see everyone raise their hand. So with that, the meeting is adjourned. The January 2nd meeting of the Planning Commission is adjourned at 7:10. Thank you all for your participation.
June. I believe that's the June 2nd.
June. I don't know why I'm saying January. And I'm looking at the calendar too.
Because January is coming this weekend, I think.
Yeah. Summer's about over.
Yes. Thank you all.
All right, thank you all.
Thanks, you guys.